welcome back to Questions for the Rector. I'm your host, Stephen Heiner, and with us, as always, is the Rector of Most Holy Trinity Seminary in Reading, Pennsylvania, His Excellency Bishop Donald Sanborn. Hello, Your Excellency.
Hello, Stephen.
Today's Questions for the Rector is slightly different. It's actually come from remarks that I've observed on social media to different photos that were being posted of Father Patrizzi heading out to Highland to say Mass there. The same for Father Bayer. He went down to Puerto Rico recently. And even of some Roman Catholic Institute clergy out at dinner. And people said, "Where is the cassock? His Excellency is wearing this suit, this Protestant suit." And we had to tell them in various ways that this is not a Protestant suit, that Catholic priests have been wearing it a long time. And in fact, perhaps our editors will show this picture, but you told me about a picture of Cardinal Spellman and Cardinal Pacelli, and Cardinal Spellman was there in his Protestant suit, as some people would say. Why is it not a Protestant suit?
Well, for a number of reasons. The clerical dress in itself is indifferent. In other words, there's nothing intrinsic about the cassock that is clerical, nothing intrinsic about a suit that is not Catholic and clerical. I mean, what you put on is a sign of your priesthood. And that sign can take all sorts of forms. That's number one. And the cassock is something, the present cassock developed later on, Middle Ages, maybe Renaissance. In the early church, they had other forms of clerical dress. I mean, there's not one single thing. There were not... Gammarelli was not around in the 1st century AD in Rome. Too bad.
But if they were, they'd had a lot of business back then.
Yeah, they go back to the 18th century, Gammarelli. And like in all things that are accidental to the church, there is a certain evolution or development. Things change in the accidents of the church, and so clerical dress has undergone a certain amount of change. That's the first thing to understand, is that the essential of clerical attire is that you beam or communicate the fact that you are a Catholic priest. So there's nothing intrinsic about the cassock there.
And I think people maybe outside the United States don't realize that in this country, people tend to associate that with the Catholic priest. We were walking in the airport recently, and a father told his daughter, say hello to Father, right? He didn't say, oh, hello to Pastor so-and-so. The assumption was you must have been a Catholic priest.
Yes, Protestant ministers wouldn't be caught dead in what we wear, because it does indicate a Catholic priest. They wear sometimes gray suits. Most of the time they just wear secular clothes. But they might, some of the more conservative ones might have a gray suit, and they're very clear in their use of gray and various other signs of their attire. I can tell right away when that's a Protestant minister. But they avoid black.
Well, it probably speaks to their doctrinal clarity. You don't want to be black or white. Maybe gray, somewhere in the middle.
I don't know, but most of them just wear secular clothes. There is no doubt about it that wearing the suit and what we call the rabbi, which is the front and the vest with the Roman collar, indicates in this country a Catholic priest.
And from a large perspective, Your Excellency, it's a death to the world. This particular color of black is an important denotation.
Yes, that has always been the reason for black among the clergy, is death to the world. You don't have to worry about what you're putting on in the morning. When you're a bishop, you do. But the priest has a few things in his closet. He has his suit. He has maybe 2 cassocks, one that's nice, one that isn't so nice. And that's it. You see, so there's you don't have to think about
mantolettas. Don't forget one.
Well, the bishops are another thing, but that's because of dignity of the bishop. But for priests, it's a detachment from the world. You don't have to worry about a worldly fashions and changes, and whether you're going to look good that day or in something that's 2 years old or something. You're going to look good every day as long as your cassock looks good. It's immortal and timeless. So it's a detachment from the world. That way, it's also a sign of death to the world.
Well, there's people on the other side of this debate. Your Excellency, I told you that when I went down to La Reja in 2006 to visit the SSPX seminary there, that I watched some seminarians playing soccer, and half of the seminarians were wearing a cassock and the other half were wearing shorts and a t-shirt, which would normally play soccer in. And there's this idea of, I suppose, a soccer cassock or a work cassock. And you made a note that a cassock is not the same thing as a habit, although some congregations treat it as such.
Well, I know of one congregation that treats it as such. It is not a religious habit, it is clerical attire. A religious habit is another thing. And you're given a habit, and that's it. That's what you wear.
You don't have any other.
There's nothing else to wear. And I remember visiting once a Capuchin house, and there was one peg. There was no closet, just a peg. And we were thinking about buying it at the time. And the person showing us, who was a Capuchin, he said, that's the rule. There's only one peg in the room, and that's where your habit goes. And they have a day cassock and then a habit that they sleep in. This was the old rules for Capuchins. So that's why you might see in American airports, especially older days, you might see a Dominican or a Franciscan. And that is perfectly normal for them. People say, oh, that's somebody that belongs to a religious order. That's his habit. You see, and but the cassock, you would never see a priest in the cassock except in the areas surrounding the church or the cathedral. Sometimes we would see if the priest was making a sick call in our parish, he would walk down from the parish with his cassock on. Or if he was visiting when I was a child, which is a long time ago, you would see a priest walking around the church or the vicinity of the church.
A cemetery, maybe?
Yeah, something that was connected or somewhat connected to that if he was just walking along or strolling along, saying his office or something, he might have his cassock on because it was a Catholic neighborhood, and so. But if he were going any place, beyond that, he would have the suit on, and that was pre-Vatican II, and that was the custom, and that was that.
Now you've noted that there's canon law attached to this as well, so that there's customs that are different in different countries. But what is the canon law that's...
The canon law is that the bishop of the diocese assigns clerical attire for his diocese, and that the priests are required to observe that. If they, without a serious reason, should abandon the clerical attire for more than 72 hours in public, so all of those things, they commit a mortal sin. And now you could have a serious reason, like times of persecution. You could have...
This was Father Miguel Pro in Mexico. He was going around in a suit in disguise.
Yes, well, I think the Mexican government had actually suppressed clerical attire at the time. So, but in communist countries, there could be all sorts of reasons why or if you're hiking in the woods, for example, or fishing, or
you don't have to have a fishing cassock.
If there's a good reason, if there's a good reason not to have clerical attire on, some good reason, of course you can abandon it for that. And nobody would object or be scandalized because they would say, yeah, you can't go fishing in your suit and rabbi, or even in your cassock. Your cassock would be a mess, you see. And I do notice that about those who do play soccer in cassocks, that their cassocks are a mess, and they're full of body odor. They smell bad.
They have to have a separate, I suppose, soccer cassock as opposed to their regular cassock.
Well, I don't think they do. At least from my experience in certain countries, let's say, the cassock smelled pretty bad. And
so there's a practical reason not to do that.
Yes, of course, it's common sense. Would you go swimming in a cassock? Would you deep sea diving in a cassock? I mean, no, it is meant for your normal everyday attire, but it is incompatible with certain things that you would do, like gardening or other things where you might trip over it, or it's also kinds of things that it's incompatible with. I mean, this is just common sense, and that excessive attachment to it, as if it's your own skin, is a bit ridiculous. You're not. This doesn't scandalize anybody if you have a good reason for not being in your cassock.
Well, and part of that scandal might come from your own prevailing national customs or national attitudes towards things. Your Excellency, we were talking before we started recording about the fact that because of the situation today, you are doing things that bishops wouldn't normally have to do. A bishop wouldn't normally have to visit Poland or visit France or visit Australia. It might be, it would be focused in his own diocese or with his own religious congregation. That the exposure, and we have globalization with the internet, people can see different things in different places, so they might take scandal at something which in their Catholic culture is unseen, unheard of. We've been to Hungary before together, and they have a beautiful custom of greeting clergy and even other lay people, Laudetur Jesus Christus, in aeternum, amen. And that's wonderful. We don't do that in America. It doesn't mean that we're not Catholics in America. It just means we don't have that deep, long custom that some of them do. In fact, I think when we were in Poland this summer, you know the saying in Poland.
I know
Polish,
the answer. I don't know how to say it. Na wieki wieków, amen.
So it's the same
forever
response.
and ever, secula secularum. That's what it is.
Right. So a Polish person greets you, and you know what to say in
Na
response.
wieki wieków, amen. Yes. And yes, and I had to go back to the Polish that I once learned, and yes, and you, as much as possible, you try to fit into the customs of the place, but sometimes it's very impractical or impossible, and you have to be sensitive. Yes, so I mean, but I think that, yes, Catholics who live in these other countries where there are different customs should say, well, we're all jumbled together with this traditional movement. Normally, bishops wouldn't come over from the United States to do big ceremonies. They might visit Poland, and they would probably wear their suit if they visited Poland or France or Italy. They'd wear their suit. And by the way, canon law says you can travel in the attire of your diocese. You do not have to put on the attire of the place that you're in. That's canon law. So you could go to Rome and wear the suit, and or go to France, etc. But we just have to adjust to one another. You see, when the Europeans come over here, ordinarily they show up in a cassock. We don't say anything. We just say, well, that's what you wear. And they might come into a restaurant in a cassock, and well, that's fine. We're not scandalized. We don't gasp. We don't force them. We just say that's different. You see, now the United States is used to that. Just whatever. But if I were to walk into, say, Home Depot in a cassock, people would stare at me as if I'm some sort of a nut,
an alien,
and that's not good for the church, to look like some sort of an alien. See, so if I am an American and they know I'm American, I'm standing there in a cassock, or the bishop with the purple sash and the respectable cross, they're going to say this is a nut house that has just come into Home Depot.
But that's not just something for clerical dress. The general rule is you're not supposed to stand out when dressing. The goal of dressing is not for you to draw attention to yourself, and so that's something that could apply to lay people as well.
It has to fit in with the customs. You see, if now when I was with Father Guépin before he passed away, obviously, we went to a hardware store in Nantes in cassock,
right? And
nobody was in the slightest way bothered by it. Right. Now, if I walked into a hardware store here in a cassock, that would be, who's this creature that just walked in? You see, and that's bad for the church. You always want to give the right and good impression. You never want to have the church be the object of ridicule because you are not observing certain things.
Yeah, and I think that's the idea, is that somehow the church is diminished by you wearing a suit. Right. And clearly that's not the case in this country.
Not at all.
And it doesn't always make sense to transport cultural customs. You've talked about the difference between Catholicism in Spain and Catholicism in England. It's still Catholicism. That's the whole point of the word Catholic. When I went to confession with Father Tritek in Poland, he held his stole up to me after I finished, and I thought, okay, I know I'm supposed to kiss this, and so I lean over and I kiss his stole, and then he tells me, he says it's the custom in this country, and I thought, oh, what a beautiful custom, but we don't do that in America, and it doesn't make our confessions not valid or
Right.
not or
Right.
not
It's
beautiful.
just
There
custom.
there are these different customs, and maybe you could elaborate on that. When what do you mean when you say Catholicism in England and Catholicism in Spain are not the same thing?
Well, I compare it to ice cream. It's all the same ice cream, but there are different flavors of it. You know, the Catholicism in Spain is very expressive, and you see the statues that are decorated very, very heavily in Baroque style, and all of their liturgy is very expressive. Their Mozarabic liturgy, just expressive is the only word. External and tremendous processions carrying these magnificent statues, etc. That would never pass in England.
Almost as if it had something to do with the culture.
Yes, it's English Catholicism has always been, you might say, a little cold in comparison to Spain, and that's northern countries. You know, the in Ireland, for example, because of the English persecution of the Catholics, there was never high masses. So, and you would say your rosary during mass. It was low mass. So Irish were never big on sacred liturgy because they knew only the low mass. If they could get that in Ireland, you know, whereas the German parishes did up all of this beautiful music and the processions, and this was in my own diocese, but most of the clergy were Irish. So the it was low mass, and and that was it. You know, we had, of course, a high mass on Sunday, but it was nothing like the German parishes. I mean, it was nothing like that. Or the Italian parishes, like the devotion, the Italian women would blow kisses to the statues, which you'd never see in an Irish parish.
No, I can't imagine.
But that was totally normal, that you would blow kisses to Saint Anthony and all of these others. And
In the Philippines, they will touch statues and then touch themselves.
Yes.
To associate themselves with the saint.
yes, this culture, and the Catholic Church is Catholic, and it can live in any of those cultures and adapt to those cultures, and it's all Catholicism. It's the beauty of it. And so continental Europeans, let's say, where there's the Catholic and there's a lot of Catholic culture that is still there, especially among traditionalists, have to understand that the British Empire was Protestant, and the British conquered the United States, they conquered Canada, they conquered Australia and New Zealand and various other places, and in those countries, Catholicism was not well seen. You see, and so the suit was prescribed in this country as a way of placating the Protestants. In other words, not to rock the boat with the Protestants. And that was the decision of the clergy, the Council of Baltimore. I even saw a book printed in the 1830s about the clergy wearing suits in this country when they went out. So, I mean, this is something that is 200 years old, a custom of 200 years.
Well, and some people don't know, Your Excellency, that Anglican clergy wore cassocks, and this was a way to make sure that people weren't confused that I'm not an Anglican minister.
In England, if you wear the suit and the Roman collar, you are a Catholic priest. If you wear the cassock on the street, you are an Anglican.
So
So,
they're even in the English-speaking world. You need to
Yes.
pay attention.
but the continental Catholics, let's say, don't understand that there's a whole other, let's call it Anglo-Saxon world, for a better term, outside of them. There's a channel between France and that other island.
There are other countries outside of France. There are other countries
there are
outside
other
of Poland.
countries besides France. But there is when they said of the English, wherever they went, they had to make every place England. And there's some of that in the French too. They have to make everywhere France, and they insisted that the SSPX priests over here wear the cassock on the street, as they do in France.
I didn't know
Yes,
that.
that's why they all wear cassocks here. You see them occasionally in airports, and
I
right
have
away.
seen some in suits before, but
Really? Well, yeah, that's I think a toleration, but normally they're wearing cassocks, and that's just not our custom. And I think especially in these times, we have to do exactly what was done before the council. Exactly, because we should not invent anything, because our message is Vatican II is a deviation from Catholicism. We are sticking to what was. We're not making any new rules. I think that's very important.
And I think I hope that our watchers and our listeners take as a major lesson from this discussion that you want to celebrate the Catholic culture that you have wherever you are, but you also need to respect the variance of that Catholic culture from other nationalities and other countries when they come to visit you. Don't make them feel like they're heretic Protestant, ministers, but welcome them as fellow Catholics and try to learn, ask questions, and understand. And that way you'll find out that it's actually part of canon law and it's part of the customs of the United States for this to be worn.
Archbishop Lefebvre, whenever he came to the United States, had a suit on. He came off the plane with a suit on. All right. So he understood the principles. He had been all over the world, obviously, and he was in Africa, etc. He knew, to a certain extent, English-speaking Africa, and he was a superior general of the Holy Ghost Fathers who were all over the English-speaking world too, and he knew that was the custom. There was no problem. There was.
Yeah, our editors might put a photo of it up here so that people can see that it's not His Excellency's conspiracy theory.
I remember every time he came over, he was in a suit. Got off the plane in a suit, and he respected the local custom, And and when I go to France, I respect the local custom. But I think, as you say, people should not be. They should understand that it's a big, wide world. We're all put together, sort of by accident, because of Vatican II, and you're going to see certain things that you're not used to, and you should adjust to those things.
Well, hopefully that clears up some confusion for those who are wondering why the clerical suit is worn, not just in the United States, but in other places. As always, thank you for your time, Your Excellency.
Thank you.